Hey everyone, and welcome to video 6. It's time for responsive. Yay! All right, so as you'll recall, responsive means making your website respond to the size of the browser window. So in the way that we've built it, right, and especially when we're using Flexbox, much of this is already done for us and taken care of. That's the beauty of it. So as I come in and bring my browser size into a mobile size, you can see it looks about right. There's really nothing we need to change in here. Right? Now, an option would be, and what you might need to look at when you open this on, if you were to open this on a mobile window and in a mobile browser, you should always check your responsiveness on a device in which it's meant to be delivered, right? So sure, we can get a general sense of feeling on this here, okay? But what you really want to do is open this on a phone, right? So that's how you would actually check your website, is to open it on a phone and see, like maybe all of a sudden this font's too small, right? And so you want to size it up a little bit. Things like that you want to check out, okay? But for the most part, we're feeling pretty good. So we're going to keep this responsive change simple, okay? Another thing that you can do to check responsiveness is this is using Chrome, but you can come in and come down to go into View, Developer, Developer Tools, all right? And there's a couple things you can do here, and this is new. I haven't shown you this before, okay? So here, if you use, this is also a great way to deconstruct any site. If you click on this arrow here and then roll over anything or click on anything, it shows you the code being used. And you can do this on any site. Now you won't see as much if it's in if it's a site based on JavaScript or something like that. But if it's a site based on HTML and CSS, you can tell this is what we already have built. It's the same thing, okay? So if I click on something, it shows me where it is in the HTML structure and it gives me any styling applied to that element, okay? So that's how you can deconstruct a page and break it down, okay? So that's really super helpful. The other part that you can do through this tool on Chrome, and Firefox has a similar tool, they all do, is that if you click this one, toggle device toolbar, right, you can pick responsive, what do you want to look at it on? All right. So if I come in here and say, I'll look on an iPhone 6, 7, 8 Plus and see how it looks, it automatically sizes it down. Now this isn't true to size. It's not actual scale, right? But it gives you, this is what it would deliver as on the phone, right? And so that can be a really helpful tool. Or let's take a look at and see, what does it look like on the Galaxy, right? Oh, it got really weird, right? So that's like something that we would go in and try to polish up and fix. Now, again, it takes a ton of time to get it perfect on every single possible screen size and every possible phone and every possible browser, right? But for the most part, if you have a good, solid structure, it's going to be consistent, okay? And that's our goal, is to keep it consistent and looking good throughout. That Galaxy thing, that's probably just something that we have in here somewhere that's not reading right. Like maybe my bet is that on here, we didn't do the box sizing on an element, right? And so it's not reading it naturally, and we'd have to go in and figure that out, okay? But we're going to keep moving down the page. And so like I said, the way that we've built it, a lot of it's already done. Now, most of the time you would do mobile first. In our page, because of the way that I'm running you through this tutorial, we did desktop first, but most of the time you'll do mobile first. And in this case, it doesn't matter a whole lot because we're not moving from multiple columns down to a single column. Normally doing mobile first, you're going from a single column out to multiple columns. So getting your single column to look right on your mobile site, or maybe 2 columns most on mobile, that's way easier to do, and then you bring it out and get it to look right on desktop. So we took the opposite approach, but I want you to know, in general, you design mobile first, not desktop first, mobile first, okay? And how we're gonna do this is through a method called media queries, okay? Media queries deals with breakpoints, and breakpoints are specific window sizes that you say, when my browser hits this window size, this pixel dimension width, make it look like this instead. All right, that's what a breakpoint is, okay? So breakpoints are based on different screen sizes. A desktop computer might be everything above 1280 pixels wide, okay? We had seen that when we looked at the W3 schools in the last video, see most common computer sizes, right? Screen sizes. A tablet, like an iPad, might be between 768 pixels wide. That would be like a portrait tablet held vertically. Or 1279 pixels wide, which might be a landscape. Now they go up to 1280, right? But 1280 starts to also breach into desktop world. So it's just seeing how they all fit together. Below 768, so like 767 and below pixels wide, would be mobile. All right. Now, again, there's like a ton of different screen sizes out there. All of you, if I asked you, like, had you hold up your phones and we looked at the pixel dimensions on it, right? Which is not the same. Remember from your responsive reading, pixel dimensions is not the same as physical size. All right. But each of your phones probably has a different pixel dimension on it, okay, based on the model. So you base your breakpoints off of the most common, the most reasonable, okay? So here, when you see, there's a website, websitedimensions.com. We already talked about W3 schools, but you can see in here, like, what screen widths are we looking at, okay? So how we're going to approach it is that we're going to do everything above 768 and everything below 768. So we're going to say our site is so simple that whether it's on a tablet or a desktop, it's going to look the same. But if it's on mobile, I want to do something a little different. Okay, that's basically what we're going to do. All right, so that's the breakpoints that we're going to go off of. Okay, the first thing we're going to do before we get into these media queries and breakpoints is to get our header looking how we want it to look. So you can see here, this is what we want it to look like, right? But here it's still stacked up. And on our desktop, we want it to be horizontal. So we're going to go ahead and take care of that first. All right. So a quick double check just to make sure you have it all set up right. All right. If it's not there already, the first thing you want to do is add a div around your H1 and nav and give it an ID of display. Okay. So I'm back up here in my navigation. You can see here's my header. All right. I'm coming to my index instead of my about page. Here's my header. Right, you can see that. And I have an ID within header wrapped around my H1, my site ID, and my navigation, and it's given an ID of display. So make sure that's there. All right. Next, you want to give the nav an ID of desktop. So again, that should already be there, but if it's not, you just want to double check because that's what we're going to talk to specifically because we're actually going to deliver a different menu for mobile. All right. So make sure those are there. And now let's start working our way down the parents of the nav to get everything positioned correctly. Display, this ID right here, is our overall parent container of the site ID and the navigation. Header is the parent of display. Now we've already talked to header and gotten it 100% width and added some padding and things like that. So if you wanted to, you could go out and wipe out, not the width, you would want to keep the width 100%, but you could wipe out all the other positioning and kind of start over. We're just going to keep going with what we have here. I just want you to know you can always go back and take out things and add things and things like that, okay? So here in our CSS, all right, I'm going to get up to about where my header is. That'll help. So here's my H1s, and there's my nav. So I'm going to come right underneath my nav styling, okay? I'm going to start to talk to display. I'm going to talk to that parent container of my site ID and nav, okay? And on this, I want it to stack up sideways. So here we go with Flexbox again. So we're gonna go display, flex, all right? And we're gonna give, that should automatically bring it up next to each other, boom. Didn't even, just one line of code. And it went, oh, we're a row, line them up. No big deal, all right? Now here, I wanna just do a couple of quick things and I'm gonna give it a width of 80% because I don't actually want it to be the width of the whole window. And what that does is gives us a little bit of room if we wanted to center it up or things like that. We're not going to do a whole lot of that today, but I want you to know that you can size things within parent containers. You can always size and nest within things, all right? And then we're going to do a margin left, and I'm just going to go 80 pixels for now. Again, you could do percentage if you wanted to, but right, that just nudged it in a little bit. Right? No big deal. And so again, we have a little bit of padding already built onto it. You could take that off if you wanted to. You could base this off of percentage. You could give the header or the display a width of 80% and then center it all up. We're just going to leave it like this for now. It's going to work fine. Okay, so next, right? So now we have our nav up next to our site ID. Next, we need that desktop container to allow the items to be positioned down to the middle of the site ID, right? And aligned by center vertically. So here you see, right? It's not doing right. They're still stacked. They're not lined up horizontal and they're up too high, right? So we need to position them vertically. So once again, we're going to do that with Flexbox. So now we're talking specifically to the navigation. All right, so we're going to talk to this desktop right here. I'm going to go desktop, if I can spell. And we're going to give it a display of flex and align items center. So again, if we did justify content, that would align it on the row, all right? But aligning items center, see how it brought it down? All right, so now it's lined up the right way, okay? But what it didn't do yet is it didn't line them up horizontally, and it should have, all right? So what we need to do here, okay, is the reason why it didn't line these up is because these are the list items, and there's actually another parent, right? There's another parent. So we have desktop here, but there's an unordered list container around our list items, right? So we need to talk to that. So we have display, desktop. Now we need to go desktop, and we want to talk to the unordered list within desktop and make that container display flex. Okay, and boom, lined them up horizontally. Now they're not spread out how we want to be spread out or anything like that, but here we go. It's all lined up the way we want it to be. Okay, so that's a good place to be. All right, so if you're having trouble getting there, pause this, take a look at your code, go back a few minutes and start over again if you need to. Okay. All right, so now we want to spread them out. There's a number of ways we can do this. I'm going to show you one method, all right? We could give the list item holding our navigation percentages of widths. We could give them actual widths. For what we're going to do, we're just going to add some padding because we don't have a ton of navigation. So we don't need to give it like perfect percentage widths and all this other stuff. We're just going to give them a little space. We're just going to spread them out by puffing them up a little bit with some padding, okay? They're also not that big, so adding padding isn't going to change our header at all because our site ID is already bigger, okay? So what we're going to do here is now we can just talk to the list items directly, all right? So a reminder of where we are, desktop, container, unordered list, list items, all right? And we just want to give those some more space. So we're going to do padding, and let's just give it like 5 pixels, 15 pixels, 5 pixels, 15 pixels. So as you'll remember, that's a way to stack them all up so we're not typing padding top, padding right, padding left, padding bottom, right? It just goes top, right, bottom, left, okay? And that should spread them out, all right? Not bad, right? Still has our styling on the rollovers, still looking consistent, but now it's positioned better, okay? The nice part about doing it this way is if you didn't need like an exact width on them or percentage width on them, this way is always going to keep them spread that far apart. It's never going to change. All right. So there's, like I said, there's lots of different methods in CSS to get to the same answer. This is just one of them. Okay. All right. So next up, what we're going to do is we're actually going to work on our mobile menu. All right. So let me show you where we're heading. Okay. So where we're heading is when you bring in the page to mobile, you get this trigger button. You press on the it's actually called a hamburger button is like the common language for it. And a class wants to rebel on me and call it cheeseburger button. That's the only thing they would refer to it as. So whatever kind of food item you want to call it, it's usually called hamburger button, okay? But here it drops down our mobile menu, and this is actually what we're doing here is we're going to deliver it as a completely different menu, okay? So what we want to do first is we have to get that into place, all right? Now we could just take our menu here and style it differently with a media query, but what I want to do is actually do it a little differently, and we're going to deliver a mobile menu. All right, so to deliver this mobile menu, what we're going to do is the fastest way to do it is instead of rebuilding everything from scratch, we're just going to copy and paste it. And so in this display, we actually don't need our site ID. That's really not going to change when we go to mobile, right? If you look where we're heading, that site ID is staying the same, okay? But it's the menu itself that's going to change. So we're just going to grab the nav. So I need you to grab nav to nav, copy it. So Command C. You're going to come under the div of display, but still within header. Make sure you're still within header, otherwise this won't work at all. And you're going to paste that in, okay? So what you just saw happen is that we have two menus, right? That's not what we want, but we're going to take care of that as we go, okay? So here, instead of the ID of desktop, let's give it an ID of mobile, all right? And on the UL, we actually want a different ID on it because otherwise the styling that we have for our desktop UL, right, has risk to stay the same. So here we're going to give it a new ID, right? And on this, we're going to call it menu. Okay, and that just gives it a little bit of freedom if we need to talk to that specifically. Okay, now something we need to add in here that we want to pull in later is going to be that trigger hamburger button that I mentioned. Okay, so here we need to actually bring that into place. It doesn't just come in on its own, you got to actually add it in, and it's an SVG that we already have created. That I gave to you in the images that you download. So hopefully you set up those files right and this is already existing. So we're going to create a div here, and we're going to give it an ID of trigger, because that's going to be our hamburger trigger button. Okay, and then within it we're going to pull that SVG in. So with just your standard image, find the source, right? So we're going to come to our image folder, right? And then within that you'll see menu.svg, and that's our hamburger button. Now, best practice is to give it an alt tag. This is for accessibility purposes, so that if somebody's using a screen reader, the screen reader will actually read the alt tag so that they can understand what it is on the page. All right, and that should bring in our trigger button. Okay, so there it is. It's huge, but it's there, and that's what we need it to be. Okay, so now we've got it all set up that we can actually start working with it. So now we finally get to do media queries. Yay! All right. So the big part about media queries, okay, is that they go down at the bottom of your CSS. And this is because CSS, just like HTML, reads top to bottom. So if you style something before the second styling will always overwrite the first style. So your media queries will literally get washed out. Like if I styled this differently in a media query, this would override everything because it's not within a media query. Okay, so we're going to come down here way at the bottom of our page. I'll give you a little space here so you can help see it easier. All right, and the first thing I'm going to do is add in a comment, right, in my CSS so that I can find this really easily. When you're doing media queries, you'll find that they get lost in the page. Okay, so giving yourself like a separation with a comment helps you find it later. Okay. And so how we set this up, and if you need to find this again, this line of code, you can always go to W3 schools. Remember, they're your buds in terms of code and finding things, okay? So it goes at media, space, screen, space, and parentheses, max, dash, width. And for this, we're going to go 767 pixels. Close the brackets, and then give yourself a curly bracket, okay? Our media query, so what we're saying here is at the screen width, anything 767 pixels or below, we want this to happen. All right, so everything we do for this media query has to be within these curly brackets. Now, why 767 when I said 768 is portrait and up? We're talking to mobile now, right? So at 768, we've now hit tablet. Okay, so we want this to be anything below, just below 768. So a max width of 767, that's going to keep it anything below portrait tablet is going to look like this. Okay, so first thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk to the header, right, and get everything looking the right way in that. So we're going to talk to our desktop first. All right, because we actually need to turn it off. What we want to do is we want only we want this to go away on mobile, right? And only have this navigation show, right? So we can do that by going desktop, right? So this right here, and it's the same, it's still CSS, guys, okay? So we're gonna go display, none, all right? And that means, look, it's gone. That's it, ta-da, it's gone, no problem. When we come out, they're both still there. All right, so now we're going to do a desktop media query. So we're going to come outside the curly brackets this time. We're going to do a second media query. So let's start off with our comment again so that we can find it easily. Okay, helps if I type that right. Okay, and here we're going to do another media query. So this media query is going to be for anything 768 or above. So it's the same syntax here. So we'll go media, screen, and min width 768. So min width, meaning anything 768 pixels or above on the width. There's our curly brackets. And so if we turned desktop off up here, in this one, we're going to turn mobile. And we're going to make that display none. Okay, so now that made that go away and we're back to our normal, pretty website. Okay, so we should be all set there. All right, if this is not working, if when you go like this, nothing's showing up the right way and everything's still there, then you have an error in your media query syntax. Maybe you forgot a colon, maybe you put a semicolon there and you shouldn't have, maybe you missed a space, okay? If it didn't work that way, stop now and double check this, okay? It's not gonna get better as we go, all right? So now that we have this all set up the right way, the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna deal with the hamburger button, all right? So I'm gonna go ahead and bring in my window so that I see the hamburger button. So we're working within the mobile display media query, mobile display. And our hamburger button is within the div of trigger, right here, okay? So we're gonna talk to the ID of trigger. Remember, it would be a period if it's a class, it's a pound sign when it's an ID. All right, and the first thing we wanna do is we just wanna not make it so huge. It's humongous, right? So we're gonna give it a width and a height. Now, best practice on mobile is that your minimum for anything that you wanna be pressable, right? Because you gotta think about it's my big fat thumb pressing it, right? Instead of a little mouse arrow. All right, so the minimum size should be 44 pixels by 44 pixels is minimum size on the smallest side, okay? For us, we're just gonna go 50. So we'll go 50 pixels on the width and 50 pixels on the height, okay? Right, so that made it much, much friendlier, okay? All right, now the next thing that we wanna do is we wanna position it differently. And for this, we're actually gonna position it completely differently than anything we've done. And what we're going to do is we're going to do something called position absolute. And what position absolute does is no matter where we are on the page, we want this positioned in the same spot based on the browser window. We don't want it based off of our site ID. We don't want it positioned based off of our navigation. We want it positioned off of our browser window. Okay? So we're going to do a position absolute. And what that does is it pulls it out of normal flow, right? And says, all right, I'm just based off of the browser window. Okay, so that's why it's shoved over and everything's overlapped underneath because it's no longer, it doesn't see the elements around it the same way anymore. All right, so now we can tell where we want to go based on our browser window. Okay, so we'll go top, we want 28 pixels from the top. This is just a different way of doing positioning that's not margin or padding. Okay, we'll go right, we want it 30 pixels from the right, and we'll just give it a display block. All right, so that it sees it as a block element, okay? Now it's up in that right-hand corner. It will always stay there. See it? Doesn't matter how small I get within that 768, it's always gonna stay right there, okay? So that's really nice and consistent. Now you don't wanna do that for everything because if you're, I know it's like all of a sudden you're probably like, why not position everything absolute? Because nothing would flow together and the page needs to see the elements on the page, how they stack up and line up to make that happen, okay? Otherwise, if you positioned everything absolute, it would literally just layer on top of itself and look crazy, okay? So this is a special case, okay? So now we wanna get our menu looking better, okay? All right, so still within the mobile media query, all right? Now we're gonna talk to our mobile UL. Now you could talk either to the ID of menu, all right, or you can talk to mobile UL. So to keep it consistent with what we've done earlier, I'm going to go mobile unordered list, mobile UL, all right? And then within this, all right, we want to give it some styling, okay? So what we're going to do is I want the background to look different. We're going to make it that gray background so it stands out a little differently. So I'm going to go background color. This is just going back to styling that we've done. Pound sign, F0, F0, F0. That's that same gray color that we've been using throughout, right? If you find yourself getting lost in those, have a little cheat sheet out, right? Or copy and paste things up top of your CSS in a comment so that you can see where the colors are. We're going to add a margin around everything to give it some space. And we're just going to go 10 pixels, 0 on the right, 10 pixels on the bottom, 0 pixels on the left. And then we're going to give it a little bit of padding on the bottom. We're going to fluff them up a little bit. Okay. All right, we're going to go 10 pixels of padding on the bottom. So that should give us a much nicer spread and spacing there. Everybody see that? Okay, so that's like dropped it down a little bit, give it a nicer position, okay? All right, if you got that horizontal bar there, by the way, it was just like a little flub, okay? All right, so now that we have that, we want to clean up some of this stuff, right? So our H1's kind of all over the place. So we need to get rid of some of our styling there or restyle things. So if you want to remove styling, what you have to do is you actually have to talk to the same style again, all right? So here we're gonna go H1. Now you would look up top on what we have above is our overriding CSS and call out these same things. I'm just saving you some time of having done it for you. So we're going to margin left, 0, okay? That should move it over a little bit, okay? Now we need to talk to our header, all right? Because we have that has some padding on it. And so we're going to go padding left, 0, all right? And then the last one is we're going to talk to the overall display, right? And we're going to give that a margin left of 20 pixels, okay? And so you can see that slid it over. So there's the 20 pixels. It was much further. It's looking better now, more appropriate. We could go in here and give our H1 a different width if you want. So we could come in here and give it a width of 50%, you know, because right now, remember, we locked it at 360 pixels. So you could come in here and give the H1 a different width to it, right? And just see what that does to change things up, okay? But for now, we're just going to leave that as margin left 0, and I feel good about this, okay? So don't worry if that's not working for you yet. That's something we're going to get to in the last video, okay? So that's not supposed to work. I just already have it built in. All right, so the last thing that we want to do here is we want to talk to some of those individual list items. They're still real tight, right? So we want them to look like this, and they're still too tight, all right? So we're going to go in here and work with that a little bit. So here we're going to go mobile and list items. So we're in mobile, and we're talking the LIs. It'll dig past the other parents, remember? Okay, so let's open and close those curly brackets. Don't forget that. We're going to go border, bottom, 3 pixels, solid. Get rid of that semicolon if you just type that. 3 pixels, line, solid, and I want it to be white. So we'll just go F. All right, that's white. Zeros are black, Fs are white. All right, we're going to give them a padding, fluff them up again, of 10 pixels. That's going to go all the way around 10 pixels. Okay, if you do so you don't have to go 10, 10, 10, 10. You just do padding 10 pixels and it goes, oh, all 4 sides, no problem. We're going to give these a width of 80%. Okay, all right, so there you go. That's it, right? So that's styled a better way. And you go in and add more styling and change the fonts and all that stuff. Now watch here, if I don't have the width, it extends all the way across, right? So it takes that, that margin and padding that we already have on the menu and nudges it in, okay? But it extends all the way across. If I give it a width, all right, it brings it back over, okay? All right, so but now we want it to look a little more consistent. So we're gonna make this a flex box. Like you can see, it's not quite centered, right? Which is kind of bugging me. It's bugging my anal retentiveness, right? Like it's kind of bugging me. All right, so we're gonna make that a flex box. So what's the parent of these LI items, right? It's the UL, it's the unordered list, which we've already talked to. There it is, okay? So we're gonna come in here and we're gonna give it a display, flex, justify, content, center, align, items, center, okay? All right. And then the last thing that we want to do is as soon as I made it a flex box, it's going to line them up as a row. No, it's a row again. We want it to be a column. So anybody remember what we do? Flex, direction, column, okay? And there we go, all lined up, looking pretty, okay? So there you go. That's it for responsive. And when we come to our about page, right, it's going to work the same, okay? So right here, you need to make sure the trigger is gone, right? So you need to make sure that you take everything in your header. What I would do is just grab my entire header, top to bottom, copy it, go to my about HTML, and just paste it header to header. Okay, now it's all showing up the right way. Okay, that's the fastest way to get it across every page. Is just the header's always going to be the same. Your global nav is global nav for a reason. It should be globally same across every page. Okay, so that's it for our responsive design follow along website. You're going to have some code of the completely finished site, right? So with all of these columns and rows done and all that stuff. You're welcome to break it apart. I really encourage you to do it. If you want to do this trigger menu that floats down, right, and actually make that hamburger button work, that's the last video after this. If you don't, it's okay. All right, so that's up to you to follow along. At this point, you're considered complete on the exercise. I think it's great if you want to see this work. It'll actually give you an idea of how JavaScript fits into a page without being a class on JavaScript. It doesn't go into detail on JavaScript, but it shows you where it fits on an HTML page, which can be really helpful. All right. Now, the main thing I want you to realize is as we come out on this page, right, you'll hit like a certain point where it doesn't look perfect, right? Like it just doesn't look perfect, okay? You can't worry. That's maybe for about 50 pixels in there. You can't worry about every single pixel nudge. So there's some things that we could do in here to help it out, right? We could give these a width, right, that's a little bit wider, or give them a percentage width to help them work more consistently. So ideally, it looks similar. It looks the same across every breakpoint, but don't obsess over doing 20 bajillion media queries to get everything looking exactly like perfect at every pixel. You'll drive yourself insane, okay? So these are your base level media queries with breakpoints in them. Hopefully you're seeing how this all fits together and you had fun following along. I really encourage you to do the last video and let me know if you have any questions.